Hey, what's up everybody? I just wanted to make a quick little demo here for a flower pendant. So what I'm doing is I'm just pulling any imperfections off the clear, off the outside, any bubbles or any scratches that may have been on it from the factory. I'm just pulling those off. I'm going to allow the gather to get as big as I need to make the pendant. So we got a minute here and I'm making the gather. I just wanted to say, if you haven't subscribed yet, you can jump on over and subscribe if you want to. I'd super appreciate it. So I'm just taking my time, melting the glass. If there's any imperfections a little further down, sometimes I'll wait and pull those out as it goes. Also, you'll notice that I'm using a little bit bigger of a rod here. Instead of using a smaller rod connected on the back on the handle, I actually like using a bigger rod. It gives me a lot more weight support in the back, and I'm not fighting as much to keep the marble up or the pendant up. So after you get about a gather, about as much as you want, you're going to concentrate the heat pretty much just right on the tip, right on that first part of it. This is going to allow the rest of it to kind of get on axis. And you don't want that back part to get too hot, as it will smush into itself and create a little bit of stress on the back end. So you don't want the rod to smush into your gather. So we're almost to the point now where we'll be pressing it in. And a nice little even press. Like I say, you kind of want to keep that back end from pressing in on the very back. If it doesn't go as far as you like, you can always reheat it and then press again. So I wanted to address one problem in this video that I see a lot of is misshaped petals or misplaced petals and things. I know a lot of times it's very easy as you're working with molten glass to misplace a petal, especially working with something so small. And so I kind of wanted to share a little technique with you guys to combat that a little bit. So just one more press, making sure that it's centered. If it's off center, you just kind of push it the other direction as it's going, and it'll go back to center. Always rotating. And so now what I'm doing is I'm just going to pull a little center point, and this will give me a starting point. And now what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to pull some points around the center point. So this will kind of give me more than one point. So if I mess up, I can kind of go back and just pull another clear point and decide where I want the petal to be. Using this technique, you can use as many petals as you like, and you can kind of make as whatever design that you like and still end up with really nice looking petals afterwards. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just going to do one on either side of each other, and then I'm going to do two in between each one of those to give us a total of 6 pulled little points. So you're really not trying to remove a lot of glass, you just barely just the tip, just enough to mark it. And if it's out of place, the whole point is it's clear right now, so you can just kind of adjust it the way that you need before you add your petals. For the petals on the colors on this, it'll actually be a triple mix. So I believe it will actually be a purple with a blue and then a black over the top of it. Specifically, I think it is Wisteria, Deja Blue, and Eclipse. If you need help on pulling some stringers, please feel free to check out some of my other videos. I do have a stringer tutorial. Try to save a little bit of time. I kind of skipped out on the stringer pulling part and just used one that I already had. So I'm about there. I might just have to make a few adjustments or so. And so now we'll start by laying the petals. And I'm going to lay just on the outside of each little dot that I pulled. And I don't do them exactly perfect. It's been, gosh, I guess a couple months since I've made a flower at this point. Sometimes I get on other kicks and like to make other things. But the end result is still really nice. Also, another thing to consider is with flowers, naturally they aren't very symmetrical, but I've gotten to the point where I like to make them symmetrical just for the challenge. But in the beginning, I like to make a lot of non-symmetrical flowers just to make them look more natural. So I'm almost at the end here. Basically, you just want enough pressure to where you have control and not enough pressure to where it melts all the way around. And I'm cleaning the tips every time that I complete, just to make sure that I don't get any boils. Spend all that time pulling the stringers to not get any air in them. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to pull off every tiny little tip where it ends, once again, just to ensure that I don't get any boils. And also to clean it up and make sure that it ends where it's supposed to, if any of them are a little longer than they're supposed to be. I am also looking for any type of little bubbles while I'm doing this. You'll be able to see them glow a little bit. And at this point, it would be a great time to deal with them. You can kind of pop them with the flame, or you can also skim them out a little bit like you do. Just take your time. I had a tiny little piece I didn't want there. I just kind of knocked it off using a cold piece. So now you come all the way in the back of the flame. Notice how far back I am. And this is so that way the heat can absorb into the entire piece of glass, and those tiny little pieces that you just drew on there aren't going to light up. It's okay for them to glow, but you don't want them to glow white hot. You want that entire piece to kind of heat up evenly. Otherwise, that color that you just drew on there will boil. You'll end up with lots of bubbles on the inside. So you just give it a little press. Once again, this is where using a little heavier rod also comes into play as well. I just used the weight of the rod. And I'm just going to kind of condense this first layer. Just a little bit. Get it in there pretty good. And then I'm going to add the dots while the pattern is still pretty spread out and I can fit the dots inside for this stamen. So for the stamen, I think this is wisteria over timber encased in black. You can kind of do them any way that you want to do them. I like to kind of go in a little pattern. I apologize for the train. I always get one by my house. So another thing to note here is I like to balance my hand on my torch so it gives me excellent control. If you get a little too much on one, you can always feel free to go back and remove a little glass to make it the same size as the rest. And we're going to continue the melt-in process with this entire layer. You're going to continue to go back 90 and then kind of let it go down a little bit, and you're going to let it kind of come in concave, and then you're going to add a little compression to keep it flat and to force the color up inside a little. And just the weight of the rod, you're not really pressing very hard. Sometimes to get the color up inside of it at first, I'll press a little harder, but whenever you're doing the compressions and just trying to get it to concave and get it to sink inside, I use just the weight of the rod. So basically right where that center fire is hitting the outside curve is exactly where you're going to want to hit it. If it's not concaving for you enough, you might need to hit it just slightly more on the face. And here's about the point where I can add another layer. I'm going to go ahead and start by drawing in between each one of the petals that I drew before, just on the outside of them, leaving a space. Still always making sure to clean off the tips. And we're almost there. Alright, and we got our second layer. And once again, come all the way back to the very back and start melting them in. And once this starts getting hot, you can give it a little press, get them inside, and then you can start bringing the pendant in just a little bit further and allowing it to heat up a little faster. But at the very beginning, you got to start back there in the back. And that's about where we're at. And maybe a little bit further. I think I may have compressed it like once or twice more after that. And now we're going to add the leaves. And for the leaves, I'm just going to go 3 around. You can keep going with the petals if you want to continue to make more petals for your pendant. For this demo, I just decided to do 2 layers of petals, and then now we're going to add the leaves to try to save on time. So I decided to go try with the leaves because I did 6 with the petals. And I do a little bit more of a pyramid shape. And once again, we're going to clean off the tips here. And now we're going to go back around, and after it's melted in, and we're going to carve it. I just use a knife and I go right in the middle, and then I go either side of it. So we're going to go 3 carvings for each petal here. And you're not really pressing very hard. It doesn't need to be super, super deep. I just kind of roll it out. And now I'm going to go back around and I'm going to poke it in just a little bit. And this will give it more of a little leafy poke look. A lot of times on my petals I'll carve them, but I won't actually poke them. And then for my leaves, I'll actually go back and poke it, give it that leafy look. And we're going to condense that down all the way. Now that we have our entire pattern there, we're going to condense it down just a little bit more than this here. Just continuing to heat and compress, let it concave, heat and compress, let it concave. Till it gets all the way down to a little point down here in the back. See that flowers form pretty nicely in there now. And now we're going to start to terminate it. You can basically start by taking the leaves and the petals and dragging them to the center. I spin my little cleaning rod as I'm pulling it to the center to kind of backspin that color underneath the clear. And you don't want any color left on your clear, left on the outside. All that color needs to be under the outside clear. So I just continue to drag it to the center and pull, drag it to the center and pull, and eventually I'm going to have a nice little termination on the tip. You just want to pull it very thin till it's a very thin point on the tip. And it can get a little messy at first, and you want to keep rotating, and then right as you start pulling, you're going to want to stop and kind of keep the pattern to where it doesn't spin. Very careful not to spend all that time on it and then twist your pattern at the end. So here you also want to be careful with the heat as well. You don't want to boil that termination on the back. And just something like that on the back end should be what it looks like. And now we're going to punty up on the end here. I'll do a nice little cold seal right in the center, or as in center as it can be. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect for this pendant, it just has to hold it on the back nice while we do our bail here. I'm just going to cut it off the end here. I would have used a little bit sharper flame, I just didn't have a free hand. And now I'm just going to clean it up on the opposite end a little bit and continue to melt it in until it's a nice flat puck on that side. Has a nice little dome to it. About like this. And once you get to this point now, it's about time to add the bail. We're just going to come in, and I like to attach it kind of right at the front a little bit, a little on the other side of the curve. So it's at the top, but still just right on the other side of that curve a little bit, and then we'll just kind of measure out how much I want. Go ahead and cut it. So shout out to Firebug Tools. I get to use my brand new Firebug tools that my buddy brought over. I really do appreciate that. And I really liked it too. You'll get to see it here in just a minute. So basically now after I cut it off, I'm going to just work on sealing that top little piece right there, making sure it's connected and no stress in it, just while I work with the rest of the piece. So now I'm going to take it and kind of form it back and kind of make the shape that I want, and then I'm going to work on condensing it and shaping it and using the tool to keep it open, using the reamer to keep it open. So here's that little Firebug tool I was telling you about. It's just a little pencil reamer, and it works great for these bells. It's the first time I had the chance to use it, and I absolutely love it. I'd highly recommend getting one. Or one by him. He makes some great tools. Firebug Tools. So you just get it as perfect as you can. Make sure that that back of the bail is welded and flat, and you kind of want it to pull forward a little bit on the front of the bail to give a little room for the rope or for the chain. So I'm just making 100% that it's good. You want to make sure that both of those welds where both of it's touching is 100%, and you want to make sure that the hole is open and round, big enough for a chain or rope to get through. Make sure that it's straight. And we're going to pop off the cold steel. I'd super appreciate it if you give me a like on this video if it helped you make some awesome flower pendants. And as always, I super appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome, and I appreciate all the support I get. Here's one last look here. Later on, guys.